two, one, two, three. Oh, Charlie had a story, a tale.
Happy New Year and welcome to the first episode of the Munn Avenue Muse for 2026. If you're a writer, a reader, or someone dreaming of bringing your stories into the world this year, this is the conversation to kick things off. My guest today is Todd Gustafson, wildlife photographer, filmmaker, composer, and now the author of an extraordinary memoir, Tales from the Ends of the Earth, My Adventures in East Africa and Beyond. And as a sidebar, it's an Amazon #1 bestseller today. Todd's life has taken him from the Serengeti to the concert stage and from the editing suite to recording Jane Goodall in a walnut-paneled room at the Fairmont. In this interview, we go behind the camera, behind the scenes, and into the heart of what it means to turn a life of adventure into a story-worthy book. It's a conversation about photography, risk, music, writing, and what it takes to create something lasting. Let's start the year with some inspiration from Todd. Welcome, Todd.
Hi,
Great
Charlie.
to have you here.
Thanks for having me on. It's been terrific working with you guys at Munn Press. Every single person in that office. I mean, they made this an easy, effortless process to make this a really quality book. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, it's been one of my favorite books of the year and one of my favorite people to work with. It's just been so much fun. So let's get into it a little. You lived and captured extraordinary stories in wild, remote places. When did you first realize that these adventures needed to become a book, not just a documentary or a photo series?
Whoa, that's a complex question. It all started with sort of the wall behind me. These photos were taken at the ends of the earth to make these stories. And my wife looked at them. They've been on the wall for a decade or two. And she said, is there something that we can do with these photos that goes beyond just showing them as pretty pictures? Can we maybe make them monetized and use that money to save the places where these animals live? These places at the ends of the earth. Can we save the habitat? So I thought, I know, we could do a portfolio. Maybe if we had 24 prints and we could sell them for $1,000, and that would be great. And then it became a book. And then Julie said, if it's going to be a book, it has to be the best book ever made. And so the book that we made is called From the Ends of the Earth. And there are 3 of them, and they're big hand-bound, heavy, likened to the Audubon folios of the 1800s by people who have seen them and collectors. So each of those sets are extraordinarily expensive. And we decided we'd like to make a more palatable price and make a consumer copy called the Premium Edition. It's a box set of 3 books that sells through PBS and all that kind of stuff. And so then we started making the documentaries about how the books were made, what it took to go out into the wilds and get those photographs at the ends of the earth. And this is now a decade later, and I realize that life is all about connections and how do we connect with people. PBS has its market, and we are global. We're global, showing in, I think, 36 different countries and 97% of the United States with PBS. So that's fine. That's sort of it's a full market for us. And a book, we thought a book would maybe tell the stories differently and hit a different crowd so that we could share these stories from the ends of the earth. And I liken it. It just struck me the other day that it's sort of like what the ancient mariners did. Say Victorian England. The sailors would go out, they would explore. Militarily, simply exploring for trade routes and things, they would collect items. They'd collect seashells from the Pacific. They would collect baskets, they'd collect artifacts, and they'd bring them back and share them with people. And so what I feel we're doing is we're going out and we're finding gems, these little stories about what it took to take these pictures and make them available to people as something to have been brought back to them from the ends of the earth.
Yeah, and I mean, the edition we put together with you has many of these fantastic photographs at a very affordable price. I mean,
It is.
the paperback is $19.99. The ebook, I'm looking at it right now, is $7.99. And if you want a really premium version, the hardcover with even on heavy paper is $49.99. So, and that's on Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, and other places.
What's amazing to me, Charlie, is that the beautiful book you guys designed, I thought, well, it's a more expensive hardcover and it's a very affordable soft cover. Half the people who buy them are buying hardcovers, and so they want that lasting quality. And the other amazing thing is there hasn't been a day this month where there haven't been multiple sales of this book on Amazon.
Yeah, no, it's very exciting. I mean, that probably why it's a bestseller. It's been doing great. Yeah, and I think part of what makes this book unique too is, we're talking about photographs, but the stories that you share are quite poignant. And it, like many serendipitous things in life, things happen by accident, like the best things in life. For a moment, I want to go back to the beginning. Talk about when you were a kid, your father's decision to move the family to Tanzania and what that led to.
I can remember that. And at that point, I wasn't 3 years old yet. And my dad was with my mom in a Lutheran church basement at a function. As a potluck dinner or something. And somebody from Lutheran Social Services, the LCA, Lutheran Church of America, came up to him and they said, "Paul, you're just who we're looking for. You have an architectural background. You're a biology teacher. You know how to get things done. And we're in a building project in Tanzania for a secondary school. We think you'd be perfect for it." And he said yes. He just said yes. And so three of us, my sister and my older brother, and I'm not even three. And I remember the newspaper coming to the house, and the words were, "Todd, just sit still for this picture. Just sit still. Sit still." But I remember that, and I still have that clipping. Lutheran, what was the exact word? Something about a Lutheran church member goes to Tanzania to build a school, and then they tell the story. And we have a bookend of that when we came back. Lutheran missionary returns from Tanzania with architect, whatever. It was, I can remember all of it.
Yeah. So, as a child, what was that like? I mean, and how did that, in a way, forge your future?
We lived in the Usambara Mountains at 7,000 feet. And there were maybe a dozen white people in the area, and they were teachers, and they were missionaries. They had a math teacher lived down the mountain from us. Around the corner was Arvid Bø from Norway with his family. And he was an art teacher. And there were just all these people who were involved. There was a girls' school across the mountains. Lila Malm was the head of that school. She was our best friend. And I would play. My backyard was the mountain. And it was a rainforest filled with chameleons and butterflies and Colobus monkeys and all the kind of stuff. And to walk to Dad's school, you'd go through this pathway, hundreds of foot tall trees and all the birds and all the monkeys. And I grew up with that feeling. Now, my older brother went to boarding school, and Uncle Fred Malloy was the guy who ran that school, and they had a zebra-striped Jeep. And Fred would take the big kids out hunting. And when I ended up going to that boarding school, as a 4-year-old, I think, the big kids would come back, and if they got a zebra or a wildebeest or impala, that's what we had to eat for the next week. So they were providing food for us. And so Brian grew up in a different world than I did, certainly as a 4-year-old. And he's right there now with his family, living with the Hadza Bushmen for a week. And he'll bring his daughter and her family back, and they will have had a life experience like no other.
I can imagine. Yeah, yeah. That's and you write with such vivid detail and good humor. I mean, there's a lot of good humor. Uh, did you keep journals while you were traveling, or was this all from memory?
Most of that stuff is from memory. At the same time, I think you can see behind me here, there are about 30 years of journals, these leather-bound journals that I took with me on safaris. And this was the days before film had turned to digital. So you didn't know what you got. You knew what you hoped you got. But this is one of them. And inside, I found this. I wanted to remember that day and what I had photographed. And so I would sketch the pictures so I could share them with Julie when I got home.
Yeah, and just for those of you who are, I mean, you can and should, if you're able, watch this on YouTube or Substack. But if you're listening to the podcast, what Todd was just showing us was the interior page of a leather journal. On the right side was his written recollection, but on the left side was a beautiful sketch of an elephant in the bush. I don't think a court reporter, a sketch artist, could have done a better job of sketching that elephant that you just showed us.
Yeah, but the stuff when I'm a little kid, I can vividly remember what the forest was like, what the house was like, what the school was like, what it was like to be in boarding school, all the little vignettes and stories that are in they're the third and fourth section of the book. Before you before you get to those, you go through the tales from the ends of the earth. This is the photo story. Then it goes to family history, and you'll find out about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but at what point did it? I'm picturing you as a child in that rainforest. At what point did the lived experience that you had change to, I have to write about this, I have to photograph this, I have to document this? I mean, how did the whole PBS documentary thing come about?
Well, let's backtrack a little bit. My dad is the guy. And he was the guy. He was a biologist, he was a teacher, he was an architect, and he was a musician of international talent. He sang in Carnegie Hall with the great one from Sweden, Jussi Björling. He had a television show in the early days in the Quad Cities, USA, and had a quartet of jazz singers. And he was a machinist. He built specialty parts for Bendix Aviation and Sunstrands and NASA. And there's no record of it. There's simply no record of it. I can't share that with my kids other than through stories. So I decided I would do as much as I could to document what we're doing and trying to make this a better world and pass that on to them. And when I get, say, the cover of Scientific American or the PBS station in New York or any number of things that could be I photographed for the band Chicago. I was their official photographer for a couple of years. And here comes the ad on Billboard magazine, and there's my picture on there. I get at least 3 copies of every one of those. So at Christmas, I give a stack of stuff to each of the kids. This is what I did this year. And so you'll have a little history that you can give to Coraline and Marcy, my grandkids.
Well, you told me that you hadn't told your kids that you were writing this book, Tales to the Ends of the Earth, and you handed them a copy the other day, or for Christmas.
For Christmas.
How did they react when they saw it?
Jenny said, guys, and she held it up. Anders opened it. He said, nice, Dad. And then Dana picked it up, and she said, we have to get together. We have a picture of all 3 of them holding the book, and it's neat. I could, give a little inscription to each of the kids.
Oh, that's so nice. Oh, well, you have to send us the picture.
I will do that.
We've talked before on this podcast. We've had several authors who've written memoirs, and I talk to authors all the time. And like you, I mean, I wish I had something that my grandfather wrote or my father wrote. There's no history there. There's nothing for me to refer to. So for those of you out there who are considering writing a memoir or a story about your life, it's one of the great gifts you can give your kids and grandkids. That's what my grandmother or my grandfather were like, and this is what they did. And the stories are so rich. I think about this all the time. I mean, even as a kid, when I met older people, I would ask them what their story was, and everybody's got a story. Yours, Todd, is pretty extraordinary. I mean, it's not the average story by any means, and it's both visual and storytelling, and I mean, you've got so much going on. How did the design of your photo books and documentaries influence the format or pacing of this memoir? What was the challenge for a traditional book structure?
It was a challenge from Jump Street because I had a lot of pretty pictures. As you can see here, there's a lot of them on the wall and a lot more in the computer storage. And so I had a lot of pictures. I thought, I'll make a book with these pictures. And I put them all together. And my son, Anders, who's a filmmaker, he looked at them and said, that's a bunch of pretty pictures. And I said, anything more? Like, they're really great? This is going to be cool. He says, no, it's boring. I said, what are you talking about? He said, there's no storyline. You have no story to tell. I said, well, what would you suggest? And he said, I suggest a silent film. Put a picture that states the place. Where are you? Where do these animals live? So I have a picture of these acacia woodlands going off to the distance that hangs in the Smithsonian right now. And I said, well, here's the place. So you've set your scene. Introduce your characters. And behind me, you can see portraits. Here's a lion. Here's a leopard. Here's an elephant. Here's a somebody. And they're all introduced as characters. And then there are multiple characters in beautiful formation. And then there's a section on courtship. And then there's a section on babies. And there's a section on providing food for your babies and protection. There's a section on competition. There's a section on eating. The whole human condition is lined up, which made the documentaries kind of easy. Never having made a documentary, it wasn't super easy, but I mean, I at least had organization.
Right.
I followed the template of the book. Now, these stories, I grouped them together. Well, here's where I'm an idiot. Here's where I'm not an idiot. And I would put, similar stories in an order, and I went by destination, sort of. Here's some African stuff. Here's Patagonia. Here's Brazil. And so it has an organization that sort of follows the template of the documentaries.
Yeah, and from our standpoint, it was really interesting laying out the book, integrating the pictures with the text so that they kind of flow together.
Yes, and what I appreciate about how you guys laid it out, there are portions of the story that don't make sense if the picture is on the top. But if the picture is sort of the punchline or the main event, you can read to it and say, that's what we're talking about. And you guys just killed it.
Yeah, thank you. It really just came together so beautifully. So let me ask you, there's a strong thread of mentorship, collaboration, and legacy in your book. What advice would you give to creatives, authors we might have out there, or people who are creative in other media who want to turn their life's work into something lasting, like a book or a film?
I think what I've tried to do, starting with the photographs, is to find a link to the human condition in nature. And so if there's a mother with a cub, or if there is conflict, or if there's play, any of that kind of stuff that can relate to what we feel as a part of this world, part of the fabric of what this world is made of, that resonates. And if you can pull whatever your experiences are and try to relate those to other people. When I talk about me falling over a ceremonial sacrificial stone in Guatemala, I'm just illustrating that I'm basically a klutz. And people can identify that. I feel that. I feel your pain. And if you can do that when you're doing it. And the other thing is, if you think that you've accomplished something, I've accomplished this all on my own. You're delusional. There are people in every moment of your life that affect you and that help you along your way, or even if they hinder you, what did that teach you to get to the next step? So there's a lot of that kind of thing. Find out and recognize the people that helped you.
Yeah, and speaking of that, and people who helped you, share a little bit about when you were going to make these PBS documentaries and you were casting about for a narrator. How did you land up getting Jane Goodall to be the narrator, and what was that experience like?
Well, there were a lot of people who were interested in it once they heard about it. First of all, it was PBS in St. Louis that saw the main big books, and they wanted a documentary made about how they were made. And I thought, well, that's going to be boring. It'll be like you take the picture, you print it, and bind it. Then you ship it. And that's what they were interested in. They wanted to know what it took to, how do you get those pictures that were in there? That changed everything. And so, get back to the original question. What was it?
Well, Jane Goodall, how did that happen?
Well, there were people in St. Louis. John Hamm is one of them. Joe Buck is one of them. These are all voices. Goodman is one of those voices. And we were thinking of all that. And my niece, she says, how about Jane Goodall? I thought, hang on. How about Jane Goodall? So I started pursuing how to get through, because she has handlers, or had handlers, who, they were her gatekeepers. And not every person's going to be able to pester Jane Goodall. But my mom called it stick-to-itivity. And I persisted. And I finally got through to the right person. They relayed it to Jane. And I sent her some examples of the photographs. And I said, here's, a condensed version of the big book. And I said, I would love to have your take on this as someone who has lived it. You were in the crater camping overnight and going down, and you were in Gombe and you lived there by yourself. You can relate to these stories. And then that was it. I had nothing back from her. And then she sends this heartfelt 3-page foreword to the book that she wrote. This is not the voiceover. This is the foreword to the book. And it was wonderful. We edited so it would fit. But she said, Todd, this is really, really difficult, and I want to make sure this is what you think it should be. And we edited it a little bit, and it's marvelous. So I took the basis of that and pursued her again to get to be the voiceover for this documentary, To the Ends of the Earth, East Africa. And she said, yes, but where are we going to meet? I said, well, we could meet in Chicago if you're in there. Well, I was there last week. I'm like, okay, you're going to be in Washington, D.C. on the something of whenever. And I said, well, I'll be in Patagonia. And then she said, well, I'll be back in Chicago. I said, well, I'm in Tanzania. And then she said, well, I'll be in Tanzania. And I said, well, I'm in Chicago. At the end of a Brazil trip, the last day I get an email, and her handlers say, Jane will be in Seattle for 2 days. And it's the day after tomorrow for me. I called Julie. She changed she got my plane ticket to come home, met me at the airport with a suitcase, and had a flight to Seattle. And we hooked up in Seattle and had the most marvelous weekend of recording. I could even imagine. I mean, it was so fulfilling.
I bet it was. We could talk on and on about that one, but I commend people to read the book, because the story of your meeting with Jane Goodall and how that went is a fabulous opening for Tales from the Ends of the Earth, which I'll mention again is available on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. Your local bookstores can order it. And one thing I encourage people who are library readers to do is go into your library and ask them if they have Tales from the End of the Earth by Todd Gustafson. And there's a good chance they'll say no, but libraries like to be accommodating, so they'll order a book for you, and it will get taken out and read many, many times. One of the startling things when we first started working together with you on the book is you said, I have this great picture for the cover. And you shared the picture, and it's quite an unbelievable picture where you're sitting on the front seat of a Jeep, and there is a cheetah, correct? Is that
Yep.
that's a cheetah? And it looks like the two of you are having a conversation, and there's about 1 foot distance between your nose and her nose. And this is not photoshopped or AI created. How the heck did you get that picture?
Well, you talked about a conversation, and it was a one-sided conversation. And in my head, the conversation went like this: don't panic, don't panic, don't panic. So there's an area in the Serengeti. Well, principally, cheetahs love to be on a termite hill or on a fallen log so they can see at great distance and find prey. They need to find the food for their families. And so in this area, there are no trees. There are no anthills, termite mounds. And so when we found a hunting mother cheetah and her son, we stopped to photograph. It looked like maybe there was something in the distance. They may be on the hunt. And so when we stopped, the mom popped up on the spare tire of our vehicle and sighted for where she was going to hunt. And the son followed suit, except took one more step and got onto the roof of the vehicle where I was. And the rules are you can't entice animals to come up. And if they do come up, you can't move and you can't dislodge them. So I couldn't, push him away or do that. All I did was sit. And he sat so relaxedly. And it does look like we're having a conversation. The mother spotted something, took off, caught a Grant's gazelle, and instantly the sun was gone. And that moment went like that.
Wow. Yeah. So there are many stories in your book like this of like amazing encounters. And yeah, I encourage you all to read the book. But there was also one fascinating story about two brothers and their last play date. Can you share that one?
That is a brother and a sister.
Oh,
and
okay.
It's a pair of leopard cubs that I've known since they were 3 weeks old. And their mother, I knew as a cub, and her mother, and I knew her grandmother. So understanding who they are, where they live, and how they behave was key to this whole thing. We went back to see them as grown cubs. They're big and playful, and we couldn't find them. And then at one point, after an hour of searching through the rocks, and they're called kopis, where they live, they just weren't there. And we saw a vehicle coming all the way across the plains. And it was this beautiful Tanzanian woman, which is an uncommon thing for a driver to be a woman. And she came up and she said, "Follow me and I will give you leopards." I said, "Let's go." And Salvatore, my driver, said, "No, she doesn't know what she's doing." I said, "Oh, we have to go." And he said, "Okay, we'll follow her." And we followed her for a half an hour. And I said, "We got to stop. She doesn't know what she's doing." And Salvatore says, "Yes, we have to. And so we followed her more and more and more. She turned off onto a trackless path in the middle of all this just beautiful golden grass. And two heads popped up. And she says, "Leopards." And these two, it's the brother and the sister. And they were at the age of sexual maturity. Their mother had left them the week before. And this was something that I've read about, heard about, but never seen, and don't know anybody who's actually seen it, where the brother and sister do a farewell ceremony. And they jump in the air, they twist and they tumble to the ground, and they roll and they chase, and then they went their separate ways. And the next day we found the brother was 3 kilometers to the west. The female was 2 kilometers to the east. And they never came together again. They were on their way to make their own stories.
Yeah. Wow. And there's a picture of that in the book.
That's a good one.
It's a good one. Yeah, so let me ask you, you're out in the wild with with wild creatures, and from near disasters at sea to quicksand, your book is full of risk. What's the line between adventure and recklessness in your world, and how do you decide when to press the shutter or hit record?
It's really, really easy. I never take risks. As I said before, it doesn't mean I'm not a klutz. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to stumble over a tree and fall, but when wild animals are involved, I'm fine. I'm in a vehicle, and props are important. I don't know if people who can't see, but here is the lens that I use.
Wow.
And I don't have to get close to the animals to get the picture. It's a 600 millimeter with a 2x on it, which makes it 1,200 millimeters of lens. I can be 50, 60, 70 yards away and not be at any risk.
Yeah, and for those who can't see the lens, the lens looks like it's 2 feet long when Todd held it up.
At least.
That's the biggest lens I've ever seen on a camera. What's your process for building trust with wild animals, or perhaps more accurately, not getting eaten by them?
I do have experience in this world. I've been there a lot. I'm on the road probably 5 months a year. And so when I see these animals and I want to get a photograph of a behavior that I think is coming up, I look at the situation they're in, I look at the light that they're bathed in, and I can see that this animal in this situation is likely to do these 5 things. Of those 5 things, the most dramatic that I want him to do are these 2. And when he does that behavior, one of those 2, I know where I need to be with the light and the background to capture that one moment. Otherwise, if you're chasing it, you're too late.
Is there a time, I'm probably many times, where you say, we got to just get the heck out of here. This is too dangerous. Has that,
Yes. There was a beautiful herd of elephant in the safari, and Julie and I were with our driver Nicholas at that time, and here's Serengeti elephants. There were maybe 100 of them. So we thought, let's take a look at these guys. There are black clouds coming, and it might rain. It didn't rain. It hailed. It was a hailstorm that never, ever, ever happens. And these elephants had never seen it. And the trumpeting, and they're milling around, and we were in danger, like from nothing to danger like that. And carefully winding his way out, Nicholas got us out of trouble. But if I were driving, I wouldn't have known what to do. So that was it was a dangerous situation that we got out of.
Todd, one thing we look for, and I'm an author of 6 books myself, is you go out and you look for endorsements or blurbs, and of course you've encountered many amazing people like Jane Goodall, and there's many on your book. And on my first book, I was lucky enough to get a nice blurb from Steve Barry, who's a best-selling thriller writer in my genre. But I think you topped us all off with your blurb from the Pope. How did you get that blurb from the Pope?
I have to tell you that I have an array of friends in all different walks of life, and I can walk from the ghetto to J. Paul Getty's mansion in about 10 seconds if you want the stories. J. Paul Getty was something else, but in Tanzania, the first time I ever met this man, Saifuddin Kambai, he is the owner of the African Cultural Heritage Center. 1986 is the first time I met him. We've become fast friends, and he's a huge supporter of us. And he bought a set of the big books, and I bound them in Dow sailcloth canvas and imprinted the logos in leather, brown leather, inside of that canvas. My son and I took them in flight cases that were specially built, brought them to Tanzania, and presented, and they had a huge ceremony. The president of Tanzania saw that. He signed them. We've got all this stuff. And the next day, Anders and I took off to Rwanda to do gorilla trekking because we wanted to film for a different documentary. That day, Pope Francis comes to Tanzania on this mission to the East African countries. He of course, visits Saif Konbai, and at his home, he had these books. And at dinner, Pope Francis looked at those books. And he says, I need to tell Todd that with these books, he has the chance to change hearts and minds and make this a better world.
And that's the blurb.
That's honest to God truth. It is right there. And I just started crying when I heard that.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I don't think we can ever top that one. Todd. Well, if your readers could carry one message forward from this book, something beyond the adventure and the awe, what would it be?
I'm going to return to Jane Goodall with one of her thoughts. She says, everything we do has a purpose and makes a difference. And it's up to us what that difference is going to be. So if we can make a positive difference, that's what I want you to take away from this book. Look at the stories of these animals and the poignancy and the adventure and the drama of their lives, and think of our lives and what we can do to make this a better world.
It's a great message, and a wonderful. I could talk to you for hours, but a wonderful way to bring this to a close. I mean, what better way to launch the new year than with a reminder that stories matter, and that it's never too late to turn your lived experience into something powerful and beautifully told. Todd's Tales from the End of the Earth is a sweeping cinematic memoir that belongs on your shelf and maybe in your suitcase for your next adventure. And you can find the book wherever books are sold. If this episode gave you some creative fuel to start your own writing or publishing journey in 2026, let us know. You can contact me at the MUNN avenuepress.com. And as for the podcast, leave a review, share the show, pass it along to a friend who needs a little New Year inspiration. And here's to new chapters, bold ideas, and telling the stories only you can tell. Happy New Year, and thanks for listening. And thank you, Todd, for sharing some of your stories with us today.
It was a pleasure, Charles. Thank you.